a lot of chaos magic rituals, including most notably a Elvis resurrection ritual, where they attempted to resurrect the spirit of Elvis. Now, again, nobody expected the king to come walking up from under the grave, but I guess they all had a little bit of extra swing in their step. Now let's move into Discord. And here's where I'm going to talk about culture jamming. Now, culture jamming is a form of art that uses existing channels and ideas to convey information that is critical of mass culture. It often also uses humor to slip past defensiveness towards new ideas. In Mark Deary's seminal work on culture jamming, he says, part artistic terrorists, part vernacular critics, culture jammers introduce noise into the system as it passes from transmitter to receiver, encouraging idiosyncratic, unintended interpretations. Todd Teachin elaborates by saying, jam art is centered in a form of cooperative subversion, which attempts to subvert the workings of pre-existing media by transforming the message into its own anti-message. So, I'm going to show you some examples because that's a whole lot of academic jargon. Now, here's a logo that we're all incredibly familiar with. Here's one way of changing that. Now again, what they're doing is they're piggybacking this extra information onto something that immediately and viscerally hits you. I wanted to give a lot of examples of the same logo and how it can be used in different ways because it gives you an idea of some of the variety of culture jamming. Culture jamming media takes the form of billboard liberation, where people will change a billboard to reflect new ideas. It takes the form of what they call subvertisements. This is from a group called Adbusters. If you're not familiar with them, check them out. They're fabulous. It takes the form of graffiti. It takes the form of sticker campaigns. It takes the form of text that uses original works. It takes the form of copyright violation. This one in particular I found very interesting. It came to me from a website called the Worcester Collective that documents street art. This was in China by a man who calls himself the People's Liberation Artist. In particular, this is a really important sentiment in China right now as China struggles to figure out exactly where it wants to be in terms of commercialization. Here's another one of Adbusters' famous, what they call subvertisements. This is a play on this is Joe Camel. And here's the Adbusters version, Joe Chemo. Now, from an artistic example, I'm going to move into an event example of culture jamming. This is what's called St. Stupid's Day Parade. Now, the first Church of the Last Laugh was founded in 1978 by Bishop Joey. And Bishop Joey looked around the world and I said, what is the one enduring characteristic of humanity? And the answer he came up with was stupidity. So he decided, why not revel in it? If you're got to be stupid anyways, why not have a good time being stupid? So every year on April 1st, they have the St. Stupid's Day Parade in San Francisco. It winds through downtown, and it's thousands of people dressed as stupidly as possible. And next, I want to move on to a ritual example. A lot of people in this audience will be familiar with Alan Moore's V for Vendetta comic. It was a graphic novel put out about a character who dresses up in a Guy Fawkes mask, essentially mimicking the revolutionary person from England when he went to try and create a new societal revolution. There was a recent movie of the same graphic novel. What's fascinating about this is that somebody decided to piggyback on this in a ritual context. And in early October of this year, a website was passed around amongst friends and by word of mouth that had an invocation of V. So, Guy Fawkes attempted to blow up the Parliament building in England on November 5th. Well, this ritual on midnight of November 5th incited people all over the world to wear a mask just like this character and to invoke the character using words like, "Thee, we invoke thee. We invoke thee, thee. Lend us your conviction, your priority of purpose." So we see something like this, and while it's not necessarily pulling in some sort of unseen force, you can also see how by invoking these equalities in ourselves, it can help become a revolutionary force for social change. Not only that, but this sort of pop culture magic allows people to, anytime they then see an image like this, maybe from the movie, maybe from the stickers or somebody's t-shirt, to remember that ritual that they did and thus call that energy back up in themselves again and again and again. My group has done this at PantheaCon when last year we did a ritual invoking the ancient Egyptian world of the dead using Muppets. Now, next time people look at the Muppets, they're going to start thinking about the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. Who else would make that connection? So now, confusion. When there are some rules, and you're not really sure where to go. This is the Cacophony Society. The Cacophony Society was founded originally as a group called the Suicide Club. The idea was to live each day as if it were your last. The Suicide Club said that so many of us are constantly putting our desires second for some sort of beautiful future that may or may not come. And so instead, what we should do is today have the crazy parties, is today climb that tree you've always been thinking of. So, since then, the Cacophony Society has evolved, and there are chapters all over the world, most notably San Francisco and Los Angeles. This is a picture of one of their events. I can show you a few more. This is SantaCon, and some of you may have heard of this. SantaCon gets about 100 people dressed up in a Santa suit to some location, incredibly drunk, and often doing such things as, in this case, protesting. I'm there with the sign, "Make Toys Not War." This is New York, 1998. The first SantaCon in New York was the one that I went to. And we did things like hop the subway. We got our pictures taken with cops. We went to a strip bar and we made the strippers blush. We protested on UN Plaza. And now SantaCon takes place all over the world. There are SantaCons in cities all across the United States, and some in Europe and some in Canada. If you look up Santarchy.com. Not only that, but we also pass out lumps of coal. If you're familiar with that myth, if you've been a bad boy or girl, you get a lump of coal. And went around and decided who was naughty, who was nice. Now, this just looks like a bunch of people in random costumes, but this is what's known as the urban Iditarod. If you're familiar, the original Iditarod is the Alaskan dog sled race that takes place every year over miles of frozen tundra. Well, San Francisco decided it was time to take the Iditarod to San Francisco, with people dressed up in dog costumes pulling shopping carts through the tourist parts of the city on a Saturday, and stopping at every bar along the way. One event that has taken on a life of its own that originally came from SantaCon is Burning Man. Many of you have probably heard of the Burning Man Festival, although I know a European audience isn't as familiar. Burning Man is a large festival in the middle of the Nevada desert every year in August that draws up to, at this point, 50,000 people who come and camp out for a week. One of the things that's incredibly fascinating about this is that it is an exercise in free culture. There are very few rules, and those that exist largely exist to maintain safety and privacy of spaces that have been set up ahead of time. Not only that, but it's a gift economy. In fact, money is only allowed in 2 locations. One location where people can purchase coffee, and the other location where people can purchase ice. Everywhere else, the intent is to be able to give and receive freely. Burning Man originally started as just a San Francisco cacophony event on a beach somewhere in San Francisco. People dress up, or not, however they may see fit. This photo I can credit to somebody here in the audience is, yeah, go Jacob. This is a group who put on something called the Never Was Hall. It's in fact a 3-story Victorian building on wheels. What makes this culture jamming is that while it doesn't necessarily use existing media, it offers people the chance to become their own media in an environment rarely seen outside of such a temporary autonomous zone. Hakim Bey came up with the idea of the temporary autonomous zone, stating that this is a zone without set rules for a very certain period of time. After a certain period of time, those community guidelines become set rules, and then things start to deteriorate. But Burning Man is a perfect example of a temporary autonomous zone. Next, I'd like to talk about, well, this is Burning Man, as you can see from the satellite image from Google Earth. It's gotten huge from a group of something like 20 people about 20 years ago. Next, I'd like to talk about a man called Banksy. Banksy is a street artist, or perhaps multiple street artists, who's been involved in the graffiti scene for a long time. Well, most recently, he has taken to making wonderful, beautiful paintings and sneaking them into museums. Again, somebody to look up. He went into a number of museums and galleries, and you can see in these pictures, surreptitiously placed his own painting there. Most of them look like fairly classical works of art with something bizarre and modern. A lot of them are old portraits, maybe with a can of spray paint next to them or something. So the medium was exactly the same. You can see the spray paint here, but the subject was similar but subtly tweaked. And he had them in frames, and he even had a little plaque mimicking the same style as the museum's original plaques for all of their other paintings. And he went in and he just wore a big coat, put it in there, and walked away. Now, in some cases, it actually took the museums more than a week to discover these. It's a fascinating concept on what makes something worthy of being in a museum, where that lies if this is part of the public trust. Here's more of the images here. And here's somebody just walking by. Now, I don't have an image of this, but another event that I wanted to tell you about was something that we did at the most recent Callisticon Discordian convention. We held a generic protest. So we had signs that said, yes, no, maybe, stuff. Here to meet girls. And we carried these big signs in a big circle in the middle of Union Square in San Francisco. It's a busy commercial district. On a Sunday afternoon. About 10 of us, chanting slogans like, yes, no, we don't know. And we had a really great time, and people kept honking at us, and people kept saying, so what is it that you advocate? Well, stuff. We think stuff is good. And then somebody else would pipe up, no, stuff is bad. I'm here against stuff. We've been intending to hold these regularly, so if you happen to be in San Francisco, come find me afterwards. Here's more of Banksy. Now we move into bureaucracy. What happens when we have strongly codified rules? Well, as all of you here know, people are going to start breaking them. And in order to break these rules, we often have to get creative. So one of the things that ties this in to Discordianism explicitly is that the Principia Discordia was one of the first works that I'm aware of marked with all rights reversed. It was partially a joke on the word all rights reserved, but it was also because the people who wrote this knew that some of the works that they put into the Principia Discordia might have been copyrighted, but they weren't sure, and they really just didn't want to deal with that. So Discordianism itself has a rich history of using copyleft and